welcome back to my channel. Happy Friday to everyone. I have had a smallish break from posting videos. Last week, the computer and I were not friends, but thankfully we have worked through those issues. And then this week, you all would know if you're following the news that the Northeast has been hit with the snowmageddon, and so the snow is also not my friend, and we had a couple of days of shoveling ourselves out, and that was not too much fun. But thankfully we have gotten so that we can get out and get around now, and so I'm excited to be here sharing my project with you. And so this is going to be a continuation of our Crash Your Stash. I know it's not January anymore, but I did lose a week for not posting, so I think that's going to be okay. Now, a part of crashing my stash is not only just the pattern paper, but I have other items in my room that I need to work through. So as you all know, I do love to create my own bases for my projects so that I can customize the size and all of that. And I really love to share with you how I create those as I work along. So I have a tutorial for that portion, and then I set it aside and I have a second already finished base to work with. And so what happens is I put the tutorial base in a bin and move on and work on different projects. So I decided this week I would really dig into that bin of completed bases and give them new life. So for this project, this is going to be the base that we created for our Valentine pocket folio. If you didn't catch that, I will leave a link at the top of the description so you can find it. It's at the beginning of the video. It's just very easy to find. And I wanted to see if I could use up a little bit of my stash as well. So I did have this beautiful day by day collection from Minte paper, but I only had 3 pieces of it left. So I pulled those out. I thought it paired really well with the pretty pink base, and I decided to use a couple of substitute patterns from my stash just so that I could stretch this collection into being enough to finish this folio. So I did make a couple of alterations to it just to make it a little bit different, and so I'll just go ahead and share that right now. This is that same 5x5 pocket folio base. I finished the cover as I usually do with all of my trimmings, and then in the original book I did not have tip-ins, but this collection has so many beautiful journal card cut-aparts that I couldn't help myself. So I just went ahead and I used that pattern paper and the journal cards to create all of these beautiful pages, and the tip-ins as well are finished on the back. So there's plenty of room for pictures and journaling here, and I was able to incorporate all of those pretty images that I really liked. And then instead of the tab top tags that I had for the original book, I just went ahead and created these nice inserts. So I used the offcuts from my pages, and I used that substitution paper to finish off the bottom of the tags. So this is a very similar design, but I think this is a little bit sturdier because I used 110-pound cardstock for the tags inside and to cover the base. And then we did add some extra space to finish it by adding those tip-ins. So if you are interested in seeing how I created this folio, just stick with me and we will make it together. So I've got my base, and this is just as I left it in the previous video. This is the one that I demonstrated with for the tutorial portion. It is the same, except I am going to make a couple of minor modifications to adapt this base to the project that I want to make today. And also I like to either improve it or make small changes so that I get a more unique look every time I work on my project. I did already add some double-sided adhesive. We love to do that to keep the pieces in place while our wet glue sets up. And what I want to do for the first modification is to add a layer of 110-pound cardstock, and that will keep this a little bit more sturdy. So I've brought my scoreboard down so that I can show you how I add the outside layer to this book, and unfortunately I have dropped this guy on the floor, and the little flap that holds the styling tool has fallen out and I don't know where the original went to, so I'm gonna use this smaller one that I have, and hopefully it will work as I expect it to. So what I want to do first is pull my layer of tape, and I'm going to be working as a regular book opening, left to right. I want to remove this adhesive and then lay in a small line of my Tombow. And this is really what's going to hold everything together well. And so I'm not going too close to the edge because I don't want that wet adhesive to splooge out. And I'm going to bring in my 110-pound cardstock. So this I have cut to be 5 inches wide, and right now it is the full width of the 12 by 12 paper. What I'll do is add this to the book and then work along, and then whatever remains after we get done adhering it is what we'll clip off. So now we know we'll have the perfect fit and match to our book. And like I said, it's 5 inches, and that is the height of our book. And then it's also 5 inches wide, so we'll be able to get the whole thing wrapped in one piece. So I'll just go ahead and line that up with my corners. Sometimes adding pockets can increase the size a little bit, but I think it'll be okay for this. And I'm just being really careful to keep it lined up along the edges so that it won't get wonky as we work along. And even though I do have my tape on there, I'm just going to go ahead and press that in place for a bit so that I get a good amount of pressure for that glue. So now I know where my corner is going to fall. I want to line that up with one of the grooves. I don't know how easy that is for you to see, but I've got it just right up to the edge of one of the grooves so that I can make my score line there. And that is going to give me a nice crisp crease on the outside edge. So I'll go ahead and remove the next layer of the paper tape backing. It's very cold at the moment and the heater is going to come on. So hopefully it won't be too loud and distracting, but I can't work without heat. So we're just gonna have to adapt to that. And then I don't know that you need the wet glue for this portion. So I'm just gonna go ahead and fold it over and give it a good pressure so that it's a nice contact. And then the same process as the previous fold, I'll just line that up with the line in the scoreboard and then go ahead and add my crease right along that edge. And then I'll go ahead and fold it first so that I know I'm going to get that nice angle and crisp fold along the outside. So then I can come back in and remove my tape and put more glue down, same as for the front of the book. And then I'll just go ahead and finish this up and I'll cut back in when I have that done. Okay, so I've got my outside covered now, and I'm gonna come back in and open this book and go ahead and clip off the excess 110-pound paper so that I've got it right along the outside edge of this book. And now we've got the perfect fit. And I'm gonna go ahead and begin to cover the book now. So luckily all of the inside pages are the same measurement. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pop those up on the screen as I work along, but you will need 4 sets of this process that I'm going to do now. The first thing I wanna do is add my journal cards to my tip-in. And this collection is so nice. The Minte paper has all of their images on one side, and then on the B side, they have some additional imagery. A lot of times you can put some writing in there or use it as a photo frame. So I went ahead and I cut up my full 12 by 12 sheet, and then I chose the images that I liked the most so I could use them on the front of the tip-ins, and then I chose the ones that I wasn't too keen on to cover the back. And so this is just a piece of 65-pound weight cardstock. And when I cut my journal cards down, I went ahead and clipped off about 1/16 of an inch. So these are all going to fit within a 4x3 tip-in portion, and then we'll have a secondary piece here that we can secure between those layers. So here is the image that I really did like. So this is just glasses and some nice stationery and a pen set. And I'm gonna go ahead and use the same border spacing as I would if I were adding a secondary cardstock color, but I'm not gonna do that here because I don't have so much room on the inside to accommodate that much bulk. So we're just gonna go ahead and put it on our 65-pound weight cardstock. Now, I also want to be mindful of which direction that image is going so that I can get my inside piece going in that same direction and nothing will wind up to be upside down. This is very nice thick paper, by the way, so it is definitely going to be sturdy. Okay, so for my inside of my book, if you recall from our previous video, so I have one side that is the full-size portion, and then on the left-hand side there is a bit of a smaller section because we have this gap in the middle that is where our accordion fold was going. So for all of these layers, I'm going to add the larger piece obviously to the right, and I'm going to add my tip-in to that so that I can put any additional bulk toward the outside of the book. And I just kind of went through and selected the pattern papers and images that I thought went together nicely and gave me a good variety. Even though I had only 3 sheets of this and 2 that were patterned, I think when I alternated them, it did help to give me a nice variety of the patterns. And so I'm just folding that over and pressing that in. I put my double-sided adhesive right on the back there. So now I can secure this tip-in between the layer of the book and the pattern paper. So I'm just going to work from the back going forward for this. This is going to be a little tricky because it does kind of want to close a little bit, but you can see I can just position that so that I've got my nice border of that pink folio, and this will be the right hand side, and then I've got the same pattern but just slightly thinner for the left, and I'm centering that inside the book and the portion in the middle that connects them. So I keep my nice even border. So this will be the last set of pages. I'm just going to go ahead and add my final page that I have prepared. So I've got the florals alternated with the checks, and then for the pages I only needed 4 sets. So I was able to get the inside pages of the book all with that Minte collection, and I didn't have to use my substitutes until I got to the tags, which was nice because I think the choices that I made with the wood grain was really a nice complement to these florals and the geometric. So that was a good way to get some extra use out of those papers and to stretch this collection enough to fill the book. So let's just keep working along. Now, in the original, I did not have tip-ins, just the way that design worked out, but I think these add a lot of additional space to add pictures. And then of course you can put your journaling on the back because there's plenty of non-contrasting pattern there. And so that's another good way to stretch the amount of room you have to fill in your finished folio. So let's just keep working along. Here is my first page. I picked my favorite pattern from the collection for this beautiful sort of soft peach rose on a charcoal background, and I paired a complimentary journal card to that because I had dark in the background. I wanted to lighten up the journal card a bit so that it would be a definitely noticeable layer. And here is my smaller side. So now the whole inside pages are covered, and then we've got our nice tip-ins as well. I can see on my cover here that I need to clip a little bit more of that cardstock off just so that it will be even with the outside edge of my book. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that now. And I did go ahead and finish the back off screen. So this is when you want to include your trim. If you're gonna put a ribbon closure in, this would be the time to do that now. Just peeling off a generous length of this beautiful pink check. This comes from Really Reasonable Ribbon, and I think it complements the patterns really nicely. Just going to tack that into place temporarily, but the top layer really will be what holds it together. Just gonna go ahead and tie this closed. Okay, so here's where one of my pattern paper substitutions is going to come in, and I really loved this kind of a diagonal check that they had in the background. So it's mostly gray and white, and so I pulled this one from my stash. This came from Hobby Lobby, and I think this works really well with that because the scale is drastically different. So it does look like a good layering pattern, and I'm going to be able to cover a portion of that with some of the offcuts that I created while I was working toward getting the inside pages covered. I had to pull that off screen just for a second so that I could get it centered. But so I have decided to go ahead and add a matting layer of cardstock for the outside of the book because remember we put that white layer of 110-pound cardstock to kind of reinforce and make the cover more sturdy. So I went ahead and I cut a gray cardstock as a border, and then I'm going to use that on the back as well. Here is that pattern that I mentioned earlier, this beautiful floral, and this is going to just layer on top of that plaid. I'm going to go ahead and utilize that same border so that I get that nice layered look. I've gone ahead and cut a piece for the cover on the spine as well. So let's just go ahead and add that now while we don't have a lot of dimensional bulky things. This is going to be tricky to hang on to this and try and keep it in frame, but I'm just going to use more of the offcuts of that smaller diagonal check from the collection and pair it with the cardstock. So that's going to finish off that spine really nicely. Okay, let's go ahead and continue on with the cover. So there isn't a lot of room here for doily because the image that I chose was a little bit larger. So I just cut that with a rounded edge rectangle die that had a little of a stitching detail so that there's a little bit more interest in it. And then I punched a hole with my Crop-A-Dile and added an eyelet that coordinated with the trim. I put a little bit of a chunky twine through here, and then I popped all this up on a spacer. So I'm just going to add this as I would any regular layer, but we're just foregoing the doily for this book. So now my image is on the front. What I want to do first is add some tags to the pockets. Remember in our original tutorial that we have pockets on the top, and here is where my second substitution came in for my pattern paper. I just picked this very weathered wood grain, and I thought that would be a perfect complement. It coordinates really well, and so I'm also using offcuts from the pages just to decorate the top. This is the portion that will show when they're in the pockets. So this helps it to coordinate a little bit better. I did use 110-pound cardstock for the base. They're very sturdy, and I left the back blank so that some journaling can be added or additional pictures. And I've also added some of that pretty gray cardstock just to give it a more finished look. These are nice and sturdy and thick. These are really going to beef up the pockets and the folio. The original one had tab tops, but I decided not to do that for this one. I did cut these tags an inch narrower than the book just so that they would have room to be added into the pockets. And I'm going to alternate them so that I can get a sort of tab top effect. And that way all these pretty patterns are going to show. And because we had 5 pockets to make the 4 pages, I did go ahead and make 5 tags as well. So I'm just going to tuck those in there, and that will be the additional inserts for the top. Okay, go ahead and tie this back up real quick, and then we'll finish off this book. So I did create a nice generous size flower arrangement, and these are all from Little Birdie Crafts. I have paired them with my usual netting and some of the foliage that originally came on the flowers. I just removed it and repositioned it so that it would be toward the outside and I could create that nice shape. And then there's a loopy twine bow here just as a nice filler. This is going to kind of curve around the image so that we're kind of following that contour. Let's go ahead and secure that with hot glue. I picked some pretty butterfly charms, and I'll go ahead and add those as I do with the hot glue and the vintage button. Okay, so our final detail is going to be some pretty little sequins, and I'll just add those here in the corner with the tombow. So while I'm working on this, I will share that I have created a couple more of these projects from my bases from that bin. If you're interested in checking those out, just let me know and I can do a flip through. I do have 3 of them already complete, so it won't be a tutorial, but I would like to share how I altered the original design. And so if you want to see that, just let me know in the description below. And also let me know if you were to remake this folio, which collection would you like to see used on it as a finished project? So that's all for my project today. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure you give me a big thumbs up. Remember to check in the description for a link on the base tutorial. I'll put that at the top so it's easy to find, and you can also find links to all of our social media sites there as well. If you're not already, I would love for you to subscribe, and as always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day, and I thank you so much for watching. Bye.